You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis Podcast. Before we get to today's episode, I just want to say a few quick things. Number one is, if you are planning on shopping this holiday season on Amazon.com, please use our affiliate link. It helps us out immensely. I know I've said it a lot, but it really, truly does. The link is in the show notes page at davebullis.com. There's a very easy to clickable link on there. You click it and you shop at Amazon like normal, and then we get a cut of that. It really helps us out, and if you do decide to go that route and you shop on Amazon with our link, please let me know so I could thank you personally. And because it really helps us out in every way you can imagine. And also, net neutrality. The vote is very soon. So for all of you listening in the United States, the vote for net neutrality is going to be up very soon. It's going to be happening very soon. And I will put a link in the show notes to tell your local congressman, tell your local mayor, anybody who will listen, that they have to keep net neutrality because you don't want to have these big companies who are able to monopolize everything. That will be the death of the internet, and I don't know what will happen to this podcast, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know what's going to happen to a lot of stuff, because the more that people have to pay for the internet for different speeds, and who has the ability to pay for it? Well, people who already have the money. So it's a very slippery slope. So again, if you really care about keeping everything on that level playing field, please consider to check that out and do everything you can to get the word out. On this episode of the podcast, I have a very special filmmaker because he has a very special journey, a very special case, even more so than usual because he's actually blind. This person is the first legally blind person to write, produce, edit, direct, and star in a feature film, which is the first time that's happened. I mean, and then he's gone on to write, produce, and direct many other projects, including a number of films, audiobooks, and books. His film production company, Beer Nuts Productions, has worked with some of Australia's finest actors, artists, and production crew, and he has been able to, he's doing, following his dream. He's doing it right there in Australia, and that's one of the things about this podcast. It's pulling people from all over the world, and it's seeing that all of the great things that are happening all over the place, and we talk all about that stuff, and how do you make a film when you're blind, and all the doors were closed in his face, and nobody really took him seriously. And now he's out there doing it, and now he's on this podcast. This is episode 195 with guest Gough.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
By the way, you are actually the first person from Australia that I've actually had on the podcast.
Oh, well, I feel honoured. So, yeah, you're making it global now. You're going global.
Yeah, exactly. We've had Canadians on. I've had some British filmmakers on, and I've had New Zealand filmmakers on. So now we're going to go to Australia now.
I'm a little upset that New Zealand came before Australia, I do have to say. I mean, I don't know that's quite... I think you've got the order there a little bit mixed up, So, because obviously in Australia, we make all of our jokes about New Zealanders like you guys do about Canadians, So, I'm just a little bit upset that New Zealand came first.
I'm sorry, man. What happened was she reached out to me, and that was our good friend at Film Rights PR, and she actually reached out to me and just said, "Hey, Dave, would you want to do this?" And I said, "Sure." And you know what, Gough, I did not think about it though. I should have said, "I'm sorry, I have to have somebody on Australia first, and then I can have you on."
Well, you'll know for next time.
Yeah, exactly. I'll make sure to make that. I'll never make that mistake again. I swear to God. So Gough, if we get started, just discussing your career, you have a very interesting, backstory because I've never had anyone on the show before that is actually legally blind, and you're a filmmaker. And I mean, I think that is so unique and so just incredible. And I think, a lot of people are interested to hear, how you actually, your process and how you work. So just to get started, Gough, when did you get started actually, making films and making movies?
Well, Beer Nuts Productions, which is my production company, I started that back in 2006, so a long time ago now. And I first started, I had a bunch of scripts that I had written, and I was sending them out to distributors, networks, production companies, private investors. I mean, I was sending out to play. You couldn't even imagine the places I was sending out pictures and scripts, and it became clear to me that nobody wanted to pick up my work, and it was based purely on the fact that they knew I had a disability, and they're like, "Oh, he's blind. What the hell's this guy thinking?" So they weren't actually reading the work properly. They were just dismissing me out of hand. So in 2010, I thought, well, the best thing to do is to make a film myself, and I'll show them that I can actually do what I say I can do. So that's when I made my very first film, which was a 90-minute full-length documentary all about disability and mental health called I Will Not Go Quietly. And so I did all of that myself. So I shot it myself, I edited it myself, I got the funds myself, I bought my own equipment, I did the lot myself. And so I thought that's part of the narrative of the story of that particular documentary is actually showing that, yes, I can actually do what I say I can do, as well as obviously we interview 24 experts like neurosurgeons and school teachers and psychologists and even comedians as well to get their take on disability and mental health issues and stuff like that. So after I did the documentary then, I thought, well, I want to keep going with doing what I'm doing. And so, yeah, I just started making my own, turning my scripts that I had that I was sending out. I thought, well, I'll just make them myself. And so I just funded them myself and started the gravy train, so to speak.
So just to sort of take a step back, when you mentioned when you were, getting rejected and they were sort of saying, hey, what does this guy know? What kind of scripts were you writing? Was it full length scripts or was it like short film scripts?
I had everything, man. I mean, I've been writing ever since I was a little kid. So I had everything from TV series to short films to feature films, like things that were big budget and things that were tiny. And so I was sending out all different kinds of things to all different kinds of people. And yeah, just putting together what I thought were really strong pitches. And yeah, like I said, just nobody wanted to know. So I figured, I didn't want to give up. I mean, I figured I spent all this time writing all this great work. I want people to enjoy it and be entertained by what I do. So, the best way to do it is to just do it myself. If they're not going to help me, then I'll just do it myself, pretty much.
Yeah, and that DIY attitude, the do-it-yourself, and I think that as we're in 2017, that attitude is prevalent everywhere because you can make your own film now. You can shoot it on a cell phone. We've had Sean Baker, who did Tangerine. He shot his film on a cell phone. You can distribute it yourself. We've had Jason Brubaker on talking about that. So, things have definitely changed, Gough, where you can now do those types of things yourself, and you could be almost a one-man army. You know what I mean? You can go out and produce your own material and say, you know what, I can do this stuff, and you know what, I am going to do it, and here it is.
Absolutely, man. I couldn't agree more. Actually, there's a very famous Australian comedian, writer, producer, director who's done a bit of everything called Ian McFadden, who was huge in the 1980s on Australian television, and he now is a lecturer at university. And I remember meeting him one day, and he said to me, Gough, it's never been easier to make, because he was talking about TV, he said, it's never been easier to make a TV show, but it's never been harder to get it out. And he's absolutely right. I mean, the equipment prices have gone down. Like you say, you can even shoot stuff with a cell phone if you want to. So it's never been easier to make it and edit it and get it packaged and ready to go. But it's now so hard to get it out to the public because it's hard for you to promote your work and get the public to your particular website, or to wherever you're housing your gear. It's hard for them to for you to put your hand up in such a crowded marketplace and say, look at me, look at me. So it's never been easier to do it, but it's also never been harder to get your work out there for people to enjoy.
Yeah, it's the new war of eyeballs and ears, and you, and you say, you know, how do I get people to see my stuff? How do I get people to listen to my stuff? How do I get people to read my stuff? You know, since content creation is increasing every year, every month, every week, every day, every hour. It's like, you know, and there's so much stuff being, you know, out there, and the barriers are gone, and the sort of, you know, the barriers to entry are gone, and now, you know, everyone has the internet. Well, for the time being here in America, we all have the internet. I don't know if you know this, Gough, but they might end net neutrality here, and I don't know how that's going to play into content creation and all this stuff. But we'll see about that. But but just to sort of go back to what I was talking about, with everyone being able to make stuff, it's the war of, you know, how do you stand out from the pack? So, you know, and I do want to talk also about your documentary, but as we're on this topic, you know, what are some of the things that you found, Gough, that enable you to stand out and sort of, you know, stand out from the pack?
Well, with each project I do, because I've done 14 films now, so with each film that I do a reasonably heavy marketing campaign. I've got a young lady called Amy on board who helps me with all my marketing stuff, and so we do social media stuff, but we also do a lot of old school marketing campaigns. So we contact the media, you know, send out your press releases to local media and international media, and even like podcasts like yourself, and yeah, just contact as many media outlets as we can and try and get some interview and some press that way, as well as obviously the social media kind of angle as well. So we sort of hit it in two ways is how we go about it at the moment. So yeah, every time we do a film, we do a reasonably heavy kind of marketing campaign to go with each film.
So is there any particular like social media channel or outlet that works best for you?
Well, I have found Facebook and Instagram to be the two best, but I mean, I've heard other people love Twitter and use Twitter a lot. I'm on Twitter, so if people jump on all of those platforms and type in Beer Nuts Productions, obviously I'll come straight up, and I obviously encourage people to like, follow, and share my social media pages. So yeah, just Beer Nuts Productions. But I've found Facebook probably to be the best, and Instagram as well. But I mean, I think it's a bit of horses for courses, you know, whatever you're doing. I mean, everybody's different in their genre, in their style, in their way they go about doing things. I mean, so yeah, it's a little bit, that works for me, but what works for me probably won't work for another guy, you know what I mean? So yeah, but I have found them to be helpful, but you need to do more than that, you know. You can't just put something up on YouTube or put something up on Facebook and expect it to go insane. You know, you gotta, it's a full-time job. Marketing that's why I had to hire somebody, because it really is, it's a full-time gig is marketing. And so you need that extra help to make sure that people can enjoy your work. Because at the end of the day, what's the point in making something if people aren't going to enjoy it? I mean, that's the whole point of doing this, is so that you can entertain people and make people happy. I mean, that's why we all do what we do. So, you know, it's important that you get the work out there so people can enjoy it.
Yeah, I agree completely, Gough. And, you know, it's, and speaking of, you know, all these social media channels and stuff, I wanted to ask, because I haven't had a chance to really ask anyone this yet. So you're very close, well, reasonably speaking, to China. And in China, the number one social media app is Weibo. Have you ever attempted to use like Weibo for anything? And the reason I bring that up was just because, you know, the country has, you know, I think a couple 100 million people on there. And I've always, I just, as a marketer, you say to yourself, my God, a country that has a couple 100 million people, then, and it's legit, you know, and it just keeps rising as China keeps pulling more and more people towards the city from rural areas, to maybe they can reach their full cap. But with so many people on that, have you ever attempted to try to use Weibo?
I haven't. I'm sorry. Yeah, no. I wish I could give you a really clever answer, but I can't. But no, it's no. I never have. It's not something that Amy and I have discussed, to be honest with you. I think mainly because we mainly go for English-speaking audiences for the simple reason is, my films are mainly comedy-based. Well, pretty much all of my work is comedy-based, and so you really need to have a fairly good grasp of the English language. So we mainly go for, your Western sort of country, so to speak. So, yeah, more English-speaking audience. But, I mean, it's something that we'd absolutely look into in the future. But, for now, probably not. But it's it's on the radar, absolutely.
Yeah, I figured I'd ask. I mean, just because I've never seen anyone actually use it yet, and I was just interested. Obviously, just because anything that's a couple 100 million users, you're kind of like, well, I guess I should at least attempt to see what this to see what this is about, And you being a lot closer to China than I am, but as we sort of go, I just want to take a step back. I mean, I know we've kind of gone all the way to the marketing aspect of this, but with all your writing and everything, and you grew up with this love of writing, and you started to write all these screenplays and short film scripts, and nobody, like you just said, nobody really took you seriously, or nobody wanted to produce it, and you ended up making your own film. Which ended up becoming I Will Not Go Quietly. And, what was the impetus, and where you finally said, to yourself, I'm going to prove them all wrong, and I'm just going to shoot this movie myself, and I'm going to do it, and I'm just going to move forward with this?
Yeah, pretty much out of frustration, people just not understanding. I mean, there's a lot of ignorance in the world in regards to disability, but the good news is that ignorance is a curable disease. All you need to do is get yourself educated, which is pretty easy to do in our day and age. So it came out through frustration of people just not understanding, my disability and what I can and can't do. So I thought, well, if I use my own story as a template, and then, like I say, get a range of experts to talk with their knowledge on these subjects of disability and mental health, then, I reckon I could make a pretty good film. And sure enough, I got myself my 90-minute feature out of it, which I'm really, really proud of. So, like I say, that was back in 2010, so a little while ago now. But, I'm very happy with how it turned out. But, it was all came about through basic frustration, really, and just not being able to be heard, I guess, really, yeah.
And I think a lot of people have felt that way, and still feel that way. When I read about different paths that we've all taken, and not only guests on this podcast, but just hearing people from Hollywood and hearing people in the indie film world, from all over the world, you start to see these different paths that people take, and there is always a time when people sort of say, you know what, there's no, it seems like every door is closed. You try to go this route in screenwriting competitions, and that door is closed. You try to go to this route, and you try to get film financing, and then that door is closed, because it almost becomes like a catch-22, right, Gough? Where it's like,
but you got to always find a way, man. Where there's a will, there's a way. You got to figure out that's what it's about, though, because you're absolutely right. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners who are filmmakers would absolutely agree with, there's nothing more frustrating than knowing you're sitting on a really terrific script, a really great idea, and just people just aren't getting it for whatever reason. I mean, maybe your pitch isn't as good as it should be, or maybe they're not reading it right, or they're not understanding a character, or whatever the case may be. But you're sitting on something great, so you just need to figure out, well, how can I get this now made? How can I get this out there? What angle do I take? Because, I mean, that's the traditional way of making films. I mean, it doesn't really work for everybody, so you got to figure out, well, how can I get this done? So for me, it was, well, you know what, I'll fund it myself, because a documentary, at the end of the day, a documentary isn't that expensive to do, because, I mean, once you get the equipment, all you have to do is just organise the interviews that you want to do and get the clips that you need to get and put it together. I mean, it's not that difficult. I mean, there's no big stunts or special effects or anything like that you have to worry about. So a documentary is a reasonably easy thing to do. And then, of course, the money that you make from that, then you can put to, which is what I did, put towards your next project. And then the money you make from that, you put towards your next project. And before you know it, you're churning them out, which is absolutely what you want to do. So sort of how my business model has been. So with every project that I release, I get the money from that and I put it into the next project and hopefully make it bigger and better. And then, I can get more money and make the next film bigger and better. And so that's sort of how I go about it, because that seems to work for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's like what Walt Disney always said. He only makes movies so he can make more movies, and that's why when the money would come in, you just take that and you put it towards your next project.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I mean, and like, I love what I do. I really do. So I don't want to blow all my money on something that isn't going to be helpful to me. I mean, I've got tons of scripts still to make. I've still got lots of great ideas and still got lots of scripts that I need to make. So I'm going to keep going. I'm not going to stop. So, yeah, when people hit the website, the beernutsproductions.com, they'll see, we've got 5 books, we've got 7 audio downloads, and we've got 14 films for people to enjoy. And so, we're just going to keep on rocking them out as quickly as I possibly can.
And that's what you have to do. You have to keep that momentum going. And that's something I've found is that once you hit something, even if no matter what it is, even if it's a short film that's 5-10 seconds or a podcast, whatever, you have to keep that momentum going, because if there's one thing I've found, Gough, it's this: confidence is a very hard thing to attain and very easy to lose. But once you have that confidence, and you can start keeping that momentum going, and it builds up. I mean, once you have confidence, Gough, you feel like you can conquer the world.
Yeah, well, that's very true, but it's also the confidence of others. So, for example, when I first did my first scripted project, so not the documentary, when I did my first scripted film, like the talent agent, so I go about making a film like anybody else does. So, I contact all the talent agents around Brisbane and the Gold Coast, and I give them a brief of, let's say, for example, I need a 30-year-old guy, and he's playing a bad guy, so he's got to have, an evil kind of look about him. He's got to look a bit dark and shady. So I'll send out my brief to the agents. They'll send me, back a whole heap of actors who they've got on their books who they think would suit. I do auditions. I hire the best actor. So I do it all how a proper film should be made. So the very first time I did that, man, I struggled so bad to get the agents to take me seriously. They're going, you're going to make a short film with what? You're going to fund it yourself and you've got a couple of crew members. I mean, that's, they didn't really take me seriously. But now I'm on to my, I just finished my 14th film. Now they've got confidence in me. They know that, I am actually going to pay their actors. They know that I'm not full of shit. I do what I say I'm going to do. You know what I mean? So it's also having the confidence in, and also the confidence from your audience to know that, they can hit the Beer Nuts Productions website and they know that they're going to get a really entertaining, funny film. So they're happy to come back time and time again and keep clicking back. So you're absolutely right. It's your confidence as well that goes up, but it's also the confidence of people you work with and the confidence of the general public as well to enjoy your work.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the confidence of others, and you mentioned, by the way, putting everything together, and I wanted to actually ask about that. When you were actually making your documentary, I Will Not Go Quietly, how did you put everything together? Since this was your first outing, I imagine, obviously you're still building a network, you're still making contacts, you're still looking for equipment. So how did you go about, getting everything together for your first project?
Yeah, well, with that particular one, so I basically pulled all my funds together that I had, so pretty much all my savings, which probably isn't the greatest idea in the world, but I thought, well, I've got to go for it, because that's the other thing too, just going back to your previous point, sometimes you just got to take a risk, you got to take a punt and just believe in yourself and believe in your work. So I got all my funds together. I bought the equipment that I thought I would need, like just a regular sort of handycam tripod, a little couple of radio mics, just basic standard equipment. I organised the interviews with the people. I just went out, I shot them myself. So, just pretty much pointed the camera and hoped for the best, because obviously framing's not going to be something I'm going to be fantastic at. So I just, I shot it myself. And then I actually, when I first finished high school, my first job was working at a radio station as an audio producer, making their commercials and their promos. So I did that for about 3 years. So I've had a lot of practice in editing audio. So when it comes to editing a film, I do it like I'm editing a radio commercial, or in this case, a 90-minute radio play. So I get the clips that I want, I put them to one side, and then I just put the clips together like a jigsaw puzzle. So just making sure that they all make sense and are all coherent, so to speak, and yeah, just put it together like that. So I just edit by audio, and that still happens today. So I've got Simon, who's my right-hand man now, who I edit with, and so he makes sure that, like, for example, let's say somebody is exiting a car, for example. So he'll make sure that the shot from inside the car is going to marry up with the shot outside of the car, so there's not, so it's nice and smooth, So he makes sure all of that stuff is how it should be for me. But I pretty much tell him my cues as to, when we're going from if it's a conversation, for example, if we're going from a long shot to a close shot, I'll know in my mind the audio, the cue point, that so when the girl finishes speaking, for example, I want to cut to the two shot then and have them both on shot. So I know all my cues by audio. So I'll say to Simon, all right, cut it there, two shot. And so he'll make it all happen for me now. So I still edit by audio even today.
Yeah, and you I wanted to ask too, before I forget, did you have a full-time job while you were making this film?
No. Like I said, I started in radio doing and then I also while I was working in radio, I was also touring as a stand-up comedian. So I've toured all over the place doing stand-up comedy. And so when I started up being up to productions, I was still doing the stand-up comedy. But then as the films have sort of taken over, doing stand-up comedy, I don't really do that anymore. So I sort of gave that away. So yeah, when I was doing I Will Not Go Quietly, the first film, I was doing the occasional stand-up gig. But yeah, no, that was pretty much the end of stand-up and working full-time on the production company.
The reason I brought that up was because a lot of filmmakers, when they're making their first movie, they're either working a full-time job, they're going to school, they have a family, or a combination of the three, and it's always like, how the hell do you have the time to do do anything else?
Yeah.
So and then it's always at that point, when you decided you've had enough, you're going to make something of your own, and this is going to be your shot. It's also about you're at that point where you have really nothing left to lose, so to speak, and you're just pulling yourself up out of that and making those connections and finding the time, and you don't have much. You get up early, you go to bed late, you call in every favor you can to make sure that this movie is as good as possible. Because I actually had on the guy Elliot Grove, who runs Raindance, and he actually was the person who helped Christopher Nolan make his first film, Following. And Christopher Nolan made it on weekends, and he would come to his office and borrow the same equipment. And when he was done, Christopher Nolan went off and was making other movies at that point, and the rest is history. But that's why I'm always fascinated about people's first films, because it's always a very, like David Lynch with Eraserhead. It took him years to finish that film. And that's why I'm always interested about people's first films, because there's always a unique story within the story.
Yeah, well, that's why I say, you just, like, you are absolutely correct. I mean, it came to a point where I was like, you know what, I can't keep getting rejected by people that don't understand me and my work and whatnot. So, you know what, I just have to do this. I mean, otherwise I'm going to be going around in circles like on a racetrack, like for the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. I mean, there's guys that I used to do stand-up comedy with who are still working the same rooms, doing the same jokes 15 years later. I mean, like I said, I haven't done a stand-up comedy gig, I reckon, in at least 5, probably 7 years. But, I mean, these guys that I used to tour with, they're still doing the same stuff, that they're in a rut, so to speak, they need to, and some of them are really funny, talented guys who could actually really kick some goals if they just sort of put their mind to focusing on what they really want to achieve and what they want to do, So I suppose it just comes down to a case of having the confidence, like you said earlier, to back yourself in and go, you know what, I can actually do this, I want to do it. And you never, hey, look, man, you've only got one life. You may as well give it all you got. You got to give it a shot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Gough. That by the way, as you were describing those comedians that you used to work with, that would make an interesting documentary. Just following them around.
Yes, it would. Yes, absolutely.
Have you ever thought about that?
Well, because the other thing too, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure a few of your listeners probably are comedy nerds or go and watch a lot of stand-up comedy or whatever. But behind the scenes, it's a very catty kind of backstabbing kind of industry, because especially in Australia, there's a lot of comedians and not enough rooms, so people are fighting for work. So there's a lot of Mean Girls kind of very high school bullshit that goes on behind, political nonsense that goes on behind the scenes. So it would absolutely make if you were able to do it properly. I mean, really do a proper fly on the wall and absolutely expose all the bullshit that goes on, because everybody thinks comedians are just happy, wonderful, hilarious, great people. But that's, I mean, just changing topics slightly, that's why I think comedians make such fantastic actors. I mean, you look at somebody like Robin Williams, Billy Connolly is another one. Comedians make great actors because every night they go on stage and they play a character. So what you're seeing on stage, they're really funny and they're doing funny jokes, but that's not who they are when they get off stage. They're a completely different person. That's just their stage persona. So they're acting, 5, sometimes even 7 nights a week. And so that's why I think that when it comes to doing a serious role, a lot of comedians are fantastic actors. I mean, I saw Will Ferrell. I mean, people wouldn't think of him as being a great actor, but I saw him in a film called Stranger Than Fiction, which I think I was the only person who actually saw that film. It was a really great film. But he had to play a sort of a Truman Show kind of a serious sort of a character, and he was absolutely fantastic. He did a wonderful job, He was really great. So I think that's why comedians make great actors, is because they're acting every night. So going back to the original point, I think a documentary like that would be really, really fascinating, because you'd actually see what they're actually like when the camera, when they're not on stage, and you'd see all the agents and the bullshit that goes on back behind the scenes. It's like politics. It can be a terrible industry, really.
Yeah, I actually had Don Barris on here for episode 100, and he and I discussed that briefly. But about, because he actually works at the Comedy Store. He actually closes there every night, and he's seen.
Well, he'd know, man. He'd know.
Yeah, just all about all the different comedians that have come back through in there over time. And on Mark Maron's podcast, he and Mark discussed working with Sam Kinison, the legendary comedian, and they would say some of the stuff that he would come out with, and just some of the stuff where it was so petty over absolutely nothing, and it's like is a joke too similar? Did this guy get a bigger laugh than me? I go on before him because I'm a bigger star than this guy, and it's a lot of the guys are just like, is it really does it all this really matter at the end?
Yeah, that's why I reckon. But I think it would be difficult to make that documentary, because I think it would be hard to get that on camera. I think they would make sure that they were playing up for the. That's why I don't know that you'd be able to do it for that exact reason. I think it would be really hard to get them to actually show that side of themselves and show the cattiness and that's the phrase we use in Australia. But I mean, if you've seen the movie Mean Girls, I mean, that's what it's like, except it's fully grown men who should know better. You know what I mean? So, yeah, but it would be an interesting doco if you could actually do it properly. It could be a really interesting doco.
Yeah. I had a friend of mine who made a documentary, and nobody was really wanting to speak their mind, so to speak, and he was really pissed off. He was frustrated, and he's like, man, it's not coming together. So what he did was, by chance, he went to an after party one night, and he was like, I'll just see what happens here. Well, some of the people got a few beers in them, and suddenly they're going up to him, and they're just like, let me tell you about this son of a bitch about it. And he's like, oh my God. He goes, this is what I wanted. All I needed was a couple of alcohol. I should have thought of that in the first place.
Well, when I did I Will Not Go Quietly, I purposely was very vague with everybody, because like I said, I interviewed 24 people, and I was purposely vague on my emails as to what I was going to ask them, because, I mean, a lot of people, especially, I mean, there was a few people that wouldn't speak to me because, for example, in the disability sector in Australia, the employment disability sector, I mean, one thing I found out was 70% of all blind and vision impaired people in Australia are unemployed. They can't get work because no one will give them a go. It's a disgrace. And so a lot of people in the disability work sector just would not talk to me because they know they're not doing their jobs properly and they can't put these people into work. And, you know, it's just a complete shambles of an organisation. So I was deliberately vague when I would send out the emails. I was just, you know, I'd introduce myself, tell them who I was and what I was. You know, I was making a documentary on disability and mental health, but I wouldn't tell them any more than that. You know, some people said, I want to see the questions in advance, in which case I'd send them some very loose questions. But I always was deliberately vague because if you give people a chance to rehearse what they're going to say, it's not true. You know, they'll make it, well, they won't lie per se, but they'll put a positive spin to make the situation or themselves look as positive as possible. So I was, like I say, I was deliberately vague with the people I was interviewing them so I would get more honest answers and feedback for when I interviewed them.
And you know that's actually ties into with the question I really wanted to ask you, Gough, and I'm glad you actually brought it up. Is when you were making, you know, not only this documentary but everything else, you know, with you know you being legally blind, is there ever a time when you're watching like maybe the field monitor or playback when you're? I mean, I'm generally interested. I mean, is there ever a time when you have where you actually can't? I don't. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, can you ever like do you have trouble sometimes seeing playback or sometimes you know what I mean? Like, or do you have like a DP that you depend on for that?
Yeah, well. A little bit of all of that. So I can, if I'm nose to monitor, I can see what's going on pretty good. But when we're shooting, because our budgets aren't big, we just got to shoot and we got to move on. So I don't have a chance to actually see the footage until we begin editing, and then I'll look through the footage then. So, for example, the very first scripted film I did, which was the Heather Rose's interview, I hired a crew. And the guy who was on one of the cameras decided that my direction wasn't up to his liking, and he was shooting all different things. And so I went insane because that wasn't cool, man. I mean, that's not the right thing to do at all. I mean, and there's no way we could go back and reshoot it because we didn't have the budget to do that. So obviously he only lasted the one project and he was gone. So it comes down to having a team around me that I can trust and that I know that if I give them a direction, they can follow it, and it's also about them understanding what I want to achieve. So it's about me being able to communicate with my director of photography. You know, this is what I want, and this is why I want it, and then he'll be like, "Oh, okay, I understand, I get it." So you know, I can just then leave him alone to do his job because I'm a big believer in that as well. Is you know, if you have a great team of people around you, you don't have to babysit them. You know, you can give them their direction and they'll go and they'll do their job. And that means that I can then spend more time with my actors making sure that I get the performances that I want. Because at the end of the day, man, if a performance from an actor isn't believable, then it doesn't matter how good your sound is or your lighting is or anything, man. I mean, people are going to tune out instantly. If the actor's crap, then, I mean, there's not much you can do about it, you know what I'm saying? So I make sure I spend a lot of time, you know, really working the script with my actors to make sure they understand precisely exactly what I want. Not being able to see, I think, actually helps because I really focus on tones and inflections and things like that. So if they're getting a word wrong, I pick it up immediately. So, you know, because I've spent a lifetime having to listen to people. So, you know, I really, really spend a lot of time with my actors with rehearsing their lines to make sure they get them absolutely spot on. And like I say, with the DP and that, I've got a really good relationship with him now, so he knows exactly how I like to shoot my work and what I my sort of style, and so he sort of almost knows before I do kind of thing how I'm going to say I want this shot. He sort of knows immediately now because we've done 12 films together now, so he knows how I roll now. So it works really well. But it's all about trust. You've got to have a crew that you can trust and actors that you can trust as well. And the same goes as well for when I'm directing my actors. I can't see their facial expressions, obviously. So I'll say to Simon, mate, how are they giving me good face? And he'll say, yeah, they're giving you good face. And so that's how I know that I'm getting the facial expressions that I need, and we can move on to the next shot. So, yeah, a lot of trust goes into it. But, you just can't have, well, it's unprofessional anyway, but you can't have people going rogue on you and just doing their own thing, because it just makes a mess of the whole production.
Yeah, and you touched on something that I'm a big advocate of, which is if you're going to hire somebody, let them do that job. I've been on sets before, Gough, where it's like people directors or producers, they want to micromanage everybody to the nth degree, and you sit there and you go, well, didn't you hire this person? If they don't know what to do, that's on you, because you're if you hire the person and they don't know what they're doing, that's your fault, just let them do their thing.
But even when it comes down to things like costume and makeup, so I'm a boy, so, I'm not, I don't know a lot about this stuff. So I'll sit down with the makeup artist, for example, and she'll say, how do you want this girl to look? And so I'll give a basic description of how I want her to look. And if she's got any questions, she'll ask me. But basically it's, okay, I get it. All right, well, off you go and make her look like that. I don't know about, different shades of the eyeshadow and whatnot. I've told you the general look of the girl, the character, so make her look like that. That's your job. Off you go. So that's kind of how I work. And it's important to do that, because then, like I say, I can focus on the things that I really need to focus on. And if somebody does have an issue, they can come to me and I've got time to help them solve whatever problem that they might have,
Yeah, very true. And, that's why you have to hire good people as best as you can, and that goes back to networking. And, I always tell people, even if you can't afford to pay people, work on their movie for free and then have them work on your movie for free. Just as, as sort of a tit for tat. If you can't afford to pay people, there's always a creative way to solve problems. And, money is not always the answer. Sometimes it's, people always say it's the number one answer because, money's money. But if you do start to meet new people and say, hey, look, I have a small thing to do, like a small short film or a web series or whatever, just help each other out, on that project, rather than just try to, constantly compensate people with cash.
Yeah. Well, that's true. It's like I said earlier, trust is so important when you're working with people. So if you have a good relationship with your cast and your crew, there's actors that I've worked with 3 or 4 times in a film, because I know that they'll always do a good job for me. They're a quality actor. So if I've got a film coming up and I've got I don't necessarily write for actors, but if I've got a film that's coming up and I think, so-and-so would be really good for that role, I'll call him up straight away and say, hey, buddy, man, I've got a job for you. Do you want it? And then, we go from there. So I'm a big believer in loyalty. If people, it's silly to go out and hire somebody new when you've got somebody who, Simon, he's been working with me now for the best part of 5 years, and I'm not going to sack the guy anytime soon because he does a fantastic job for me. So, it's important as well to make sure that once you find good people, you do whatever you can to get them to stick around. You know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. You got to keep that team going, and that's why I always see directors working with the same people over and over again. It's because they've built that team, and they sort of work well together. And as you made your film, I Will Not Go Quietly, which by the way is free on your website. I think that's really, really cool, by the way. And you started to make some other films, other projects, other short films. So what was sort of that journey? Obviously, Gough, just making these other films. Did you start to get more and more of a budget, or did you always try to keep the same sort of style and same budget moving forward?
Oh no! I try and get as big a budget as I possibly can. So it gives me a little bit more breathing space, so I can maybe hire an extra crew member, or if I need a few other extras or whatever, I can do that. So I always try and get as big a budget as I can. But like I say, it always depends on the sales of the last film. So that's why, obviously, I encourage people to to hit up beernutsproductions.com and they'll see all the films and whatnot up there, and they can download whatever they want to, and they're safe in the knowledge that while they're getting entertained by that particular film, that purchase or download is going towards making my next film to entertain them. So again, everybody wins, you know. So I try and scrape together as much in the way of funds as I possibly can. So yeah, it does help. Let's be honest. I mean, it really does help. You know, the more money you have, the better you can do things, the more relaxed things can be. So yeah, no, I do try and raise as much as I can. But like I say, it all depends on sales.
So, you know, just as we talk again about, you know, your project and sales, or sorry, your project and sales, you know, what has been the most challenging aspect of all this? Has it ever been, you know, getting a location? Has something ever fallen through that was a guarantee? You know, what was one of the biggest challenges that you faced, Gough, and how did you overcome that?
Well, the films are reasonably straightforward. I mean, like I say, I've got a good experience in this industry, so, you know, and I'm not one to jump up and down and panic. So if for a film that we're doing currently at the moment, we've had a bit of trouble finding a specific location, but that's okay. I'll just keep going until I find someone who wants to play nice and let us film at their location. But so it's more about the marketing side of things. That's what I've really found a struggle. Going back to one of the things we discussed earlier in the chat was marketing, and that's the number one thing that we constantly are fighting. And that's why, like I said, I had to employ somebody full time for that, because it was just trying to constantly market and then make the films as well it was getting too much. So, plus I needed somebody with more specific skills, because that's not my skill set, isn't marketing. That's another important thing as well. When I think with filmmaking is you got to know what you're good at. So, I mean, when it comes to the writing and directing, that I can do, and producing, I can do all that. But when it comes to, I mean, I'm no good with the artwork because I can't see, so I get someone in to do that. And same with marketing. I mean, I tried the best I could, but in the end, I knew I had to find somebody else, someone with more experience and knowledge in that area. So that's where Amy came in, and she's taken it through the roof for me, which has been fantastic. But yeah, as far as the films themselves go, look, I just do what I do, man. I mean, I like I said, I do it all like a normal film would get made. You know, I get the locations I need, I get the actors I need. If I need any specific crew members, I just search around till I find the right people, and I just keep going. We just so there hasn't been any real big challenges in that regard. Like I say, it's all about marketing. That's the number one thing that has always, ever since day one, has been the number one challenge, has been getting the work out there to the people.
And so now that you have all this together, you have the website, and you have all of your projects all in one spot. You know, have you noticed, Gough? Have you noticed a sort of a steady increase of views as you sort of get out there more and more? People are discovering you and your story. Have you noticed that, or is it something, or are you trying to sort of, you know, or are you still sort of looking for that silver bullet, if you know what I mean?
Oh, no, it is steadily increasing. I mean, I'd always like it to increase more, obviously, but, you know, but it is steadily, slowly but surely growing, you know, which is fantastic. I mean, and that's why I'm so grateful to people like yourself for having me on the podcast and letting me, you know, talk about Beer Nuts Productions and what I do, so that people can have a chance to enjoy my work. And so that's why, like I say, I'm very grateful for your time and for the podcast. You know, it helps out people like me tremendously to share their work. So, yeah, but it's steadily rising. But hopefully it keeps growing and growing and growing. Because that's like I said in the beginning, man. I mean, there's 7 billion people on this earth, and I'm not going to be happy until all 7 billion have watched one of my films. So that's the goal, you know. So it'll never be big enough.
And that's exactly it, my friend. You've hit the nail on the head. That's what I have that. I always say it to myself too. I'm always like, there's 7 billion people on this planet, and by 2030 or 2050, there's going to be like, I think it's going to be up to like 10 billion because of the additions of all the additions of China and India. Their populations keep rapidly expanding, especially India, and India is going to be the most populated country in the world soon.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, and just their film industry, the Bollywood film industry. I mean, that is massive. I think I could be way wrong, but I think I heard somewhere. I was watching a documentary on it, and I'm pretty sure they said it's the second biggest grossing product for India is Bollywood. Their film industry earns the second, amount of money for that particular country's income comes from Bollywood films, which is just staggering. It's mind-blowing. So, the film industry in India is a huge, huge, huge thing.
Yeah, and I did hear that as well, and because they produce so many different movies, a month. I mean, there's always...
they turn them out like butter.
Yeah, seriously. There's always another hit Bollywood movie coming out. It's and then some of them, the rare top couple find their way over here to the USA, and they sort of they play in certain areas, which some of them are fantastic, and then other ones I try to watch films from all over. And I'm not a big musical guy, so sometimes when they break out into song and dance, it's just not my jam,
Yeah, no, they do have a very unique style. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad or it's good or anything like that. I'm just saying, they've got their own way and style of making film in Bollywood. It's very bright, it's very in your face, it's very song and dance, and then a fight scene will break out. It's a bit of it's just all sort of action going on 24/7. It's a very different style to how the Western side of the world makes films. No doubt about that.
Yeah, and but there are some of the really cool ones out there, and but that's a whole nother story for another time. Gough, we've been talking for about 50 minutes now. So just in closing, is there anything you wanted to say to sort of put a period at the end of this whole conversation?
Well, just my latest film is The Environment, The Real Truth, which is a mockumentary about the environment. So I'm in a bit of a mockumentary kind of a mood. I've made one about drugs, and I've made one about the porn industry, and now I did one about the environment. The next one that I'm going to do is about the fitness industry. So I'm in a bit of a mockumentary kind of a feel at the moment. I sort of get into a mood of a style of filmmaking, and then I sort of just ran that into the ground kind of thing. So, the last film was The Environment, The Real Truth. So where I interview, fake scientists and conservationists, like a Steve Irwin kind of a conservation guy, and then I've got the park ranger, and like I say, a few different scientists as well. So it was a lot of fun. So it goes for about 25 minutes, and people can just download that particular film and all the films, audio products and books are all available at just beernutsproductions.com. So people can drink a beer, eat some nuts, and enjoy my work. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, that's a really cool name, by the way. I was actually going to mention that, Beer Nuts. I was like, it's like beer nuts. They serve at a bar. You grab a... So obviously, before I would be verbose if I didn't actually mention this, Gough. They don't really drink Foster's in Australia, right?
No. We sell that to the idiots overseas. We drink good beer over here.
So what is your beer of choice?
Well, in Australia, the number one beer over here is Carlton Draft. It's that's our number one beer over here. But we're big beer drinkers in Australia, man. I mean, there are literally hundreds and hundreds of. Actually, it's kind of funny. The last film that we did, the Environment, The Real Truth, we had to film a scene in a brewery, and so there's quite a few around the Gold Coast where I live. And so I contacted one, and they're like, "Yeah, man, come in, film. That's fine." I said, "Are you sure? I mean, workplace health and safety, or you're processing like food kind of products. I mean, are we cool to do?" He said, "Yeah, just come in, do what you want to do." They were the most easygoing people I've ever worked with, ever. So we've rocked up to film the scene that we need to do, and I'm like, "Well, is there any places you don't want us to go, or is there anything that we need to know?" Or he's like, "No, man, just wherever you want to go. It's all sweet, it's all fine." I said, "Okay, great." And then he gave us a couple of beers before we left. It was delicious. So I need to. Everybody's saying to me now, like all my crew are saying to me, "You have to write something else about it being in a brewery so we can go back." So. But it's nice when you have people like that just want to nice and cooperative and easygoing and just want to help out. So Yeah, but that was for the last film. We were in the Bolter Brewing Company, helped us out a lot with the location.
You know, I should mention them in the show notes. That was actually really, really cool of them. So if you shoot me their name, Gough, I'll make sure to mention them in the show notes.
Well, actually, I don't know for your listeners who might be big fans of surfing, the sport of surfing. 3 Australian surfers, Mick Fanning, the guy that punched a shark in the face a few years ago in South Africa, that made the news all over the world. But Mick Fanning, who's a number 1 surfer, Joel Parkinson, and, oh man, I've forgotten the other guy. Those 3 lads, they just wanted, with their spare cash, they were like, oh, what shall we do? We'll open a brewery. So that's what they did. And like a year later, it's just kicking goals and going from strength to strength. So it's actually their brewery is where we filmed. And it's because there's a big surfing culture here on the Gold Coast where I live, because I live sort of on the Florida of Australia is where I live. So there's big waves just outside my front door pretty much. So Mick Fanning and Joel Parkinson and that, they come from where I'm at. So, yeah, they decided to start a brewery, and good for me because we end up filming there. So, it's worked out well for everybody. So, yeah, it's funny how things work out like that. But, yeah, really cool.
You know, a surfer punching a shark, that might be the most Australian thing I've heard of ever. That's
well, yeah, if people haven't seen it, I mean, it was on the news. It happened about a year ago. If you just jump on YouTube and type Mick Fanning, I don't know, shark punch or something like that, it happened in a competition in South Africa in J-Bay. And, yeah, he was Julian Wilson was the other surfer in the water. And, yeah, it's really remarkable footage. And, I mean, it's funny now because everything was okay. But the part that makes me laugh the most is the commentator who's commentating the action, his reaction, because he's like, holy shit! He's like, it was very, he's freaking out because, you know, a wave goes over just as this shark's coming at Mick Fanning, and they're like, has he gone under? What's wrong? You know, it's actually, but the commentator's reaction's actually very, very funny. So yeah, people could just jump on YouTube and watch that. It's a funny clip.
Yeah, I will make sure to look for that and put that in the show notes. But that definitely, I now every time I think of Australia, I'm just going to think of that. Even though it didn't happen in Australia, it happened in South Africa. But still, it's an Australian thing to happen. I remember there was this video I saw one time. This kangaroo actually had this guy's dog and it was holding him, and this guy wanted to save his dog, so he leapt over this fence and he punched the kangaroo straight in the face, and the kangaroo fell back on its tail and then just stood back upright, and the guy just ran off because the kangaroo, I mean, you've seen kangaroos, they can take a punch. So it's kind of...
they're 6 foot tall. I mean, you don't fuck with a kangaroo. They're vicious animals. I mean, people think there's like koalas. I mean, koalas are actually quite, I mean, their claws, they climb trees, and so their claws, they can rip your throat out. So, I mean, you don't fuck with the Australian wildlife, man. That's just a no-go zone. So, yeah, but I have seen that clip with the kangaroo. It's very funny.
Yeah, I've seen some of those kangaroos, and their tail, they can move it, so it's kind of like they never actually fall down. They're always
That's it.
Yeah. Gough, it has been a hell of a time talking to you, man, and I'm glad we could actually connect again, because you have a unique story. As is, you know, again, everyone has a journey in the filmmaking world, making content, making media, whatever that might be, and I'm glad we could connect. And everything Gough and I talked about will be in the show notes at davebullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. The podcast is at DD Podcast. I'm getting really into Instagram and YouTube, by the way, Gough. Really into those two. Twitter's my networking tool, and I'm using Instagram and YouTube to sort of spread the word about the podcast a little more. That's been my marketing mix, working on a little stuff behind the scenes that I'll be glad to talk to you about, and at another time when I have a little bit more of a concrete plan. Because I right now I'm in my mad scientist phase where I'm kind of like, I can use a little bit of this and I use a little bit of that. So I don't really have anything yet. I don't have the Frankenstein's monster to show you. So, but
you just got to find that hook, buddy. You just got to find that hook, and then just like I say, just ram it into the ground. You know. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I just need that the few more body parts, the lightning, and I can make that monster. So, Gough, I want to wish you the best, buddy, and I will talk to you very soon.
Thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate your time, Dave.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.